This gospel section, which is called a pericope, which is a gospel piece that can stand by itself, tells us in verse 1, after he, meaning Jesus, had ended all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capharnaum. Well, what sayings are these? We need to look backward in chapter 6 for a little bit to see what those sayings are. Starting with verse 17, we're told, Jesus came down from the hills where he had prayed through the night, and he began to teach the people. This is called the Sermon on the Plain, contrasted with the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus had come down to a flat place, the plain, which signifies that he's one of us, he's on our level. There's nothing mysterious or too high or inaccessible in Jesus' teaching. He speaks plainly. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Stop judging. Stop condemning. Give generously. Don't be a hypocrite, which means don't be an actor. Check yourself before correcting other people. It's a plain teaching. We're the ones who complicate it. And when he finished his teaching, he went to a non-Jewish area called Capharnaum. Jesus doesn't worry about the barriers and the demarcations that we draw. He goes anywhere to talk to anyone, everyone. Religion can be very clubby at times. It's simply not Jesus' way. Then in verse 3, we see at Capharnaum there was a centurion, a Roman soldier, a non-Jew, and he had a slave who he really cared about. And this is very unusual. A slave in that ancient culture was of no more value or importance than an animal or a tool. If you had a slave, you were to have no personal connection with him. But this soldier, this officer, had a slave who we're told, quote unquote, was very dear to him. We could say it plainly. He loved him. And this much-loved slave was seriously sick, near death, St. Luke tells us. And so the soldier was worried for him. It's a very human story. The soldier, the officer, had heard about Jesus, and in humility, which means down to earth about yourself, he sent Jewish leaders to ask Jesus to pay a house call. He sent others to speak for him. We might ask, was he afraid that Jesus would refuse? He didn't know that Jesus felt that he was not bound by rules about who's in, who's out. Jesus isn't that way, but we are. Our country is all torn up by red, blue, left, right, north, south, black, white. We need to learn Jesus. In verses 4 and 5, the Jewish leaders don't realize that Jesus doesn't put conditions on his gifts. These guys sound manipulative, kind of saying, oh, Jesus, you should do this because the soldier gave us money to build a synagogue. But Jesus wouldn't do anything for money. A lot of religion is tied up with money. The great Protestant Reformation, which splintered Christianity right up to today, was largely about money, the selling of indulgences. Give big money and you can memorialize a church window or a church door. Pay for the altar candles. Pay for the tabernacle candle. Pay for the bread and the wine. But these things come from all of us, not from somebody's special donation. Jesus would have none of this. We should ask that question more often in the life of the church. Would Jesus allow this? Would Jesus even tolerate this? In verses 6 and 7, Jesus went off with them to the soldier's house. But we can be sure he didn't need their argument to convince him. But while they're still a distance from the house, the centurion's friends come out to meet Jesus. And I wonder if in the interim, the soldier's been thinking about his request, and in a still deeper humility has perhaps thought, Jesus doesn't have to come all this distance after all. He can just send the word and everything will be okay. It's very interesting. He tells Jesus what to do. Maybe our prayer should be more bold, less pious, less milquetoast, less vague. And doesn't he sound like Mary, who said to the angel Gabriel, "Let it be done to me as you have said"? That's why a Catholic calls Mary the first disciple. She's the first to respond to Christ this way. She's the first to say yes to the power of God's word. Notice too, the centurion's friends address Jesus as Lord. Lord is an Easter title for Jesus. In verse 8, then the centurion has more to say to Jesus through the friends that he's sent as emissaries. He expounds on the power of the word. He understands military authority. Come, go, do this, do that. Maybe he's thinking, if people follow my word, and I'm just a soldier in authority, how much more will Jesus' word be effective over distance and for an unknown person? And when Jesus heard this, he turned to the crowd, which only now we're learning was following Jesus after the Sermon on the Plain. And Jesus marveled, that's the gospel word, marveled at the centurion's faith. Maybe today we'd say he was stunned by it. Jesus is putting the sermon into action, and the crowd sees it. Jesus says, I tell you, even in Israel, I've not found such faith. Another translation says, I have not found such great faith. Jesus knows faith when he sees it, wherever it's found, in whomever it's found. And he especially revels in faith where others say it's not likely to be found. A Catholic man told me about his driving in a car with a Muslim doctor on a long trip. The Catholic man was the driver. And at noon, while on a fast-moving highway, the doctor asked the Catholic man to pull over off to the side of the road. And when the car stopped, the doctor got out of the car and spread out the small prayer carpet that he carried with him where the pavement meets the weeds, and head down to the ground, he prayed as prescribed in Islam. I mean, yikes. A senior priest told me that in his diocese, only 8%, that's 8 in every 100 people, participates in Mass on Sunday. And among those who do go, many are hoping for the short version, or the Catholics who dive into their food or in and out of bed with no thought of God. I may have shared here before about the Catholic family who got me out of bed at midnight to go to the hospital where their relative was dying. And when I arrived, the family walked out the door and down the hall. They'd done their duty, called the priest. The priest will do the praying for us. Conversely, in truth, I've also met Catholic families who have stayed for the prayers around a sick bed at very inconvenient hours through the night and prayed deeply with me. I consider those meetings with prayerful Catholics to be among the most treasured moments of my priesthood, escorting a soul as far as we can, right up to the line where that person steps over into eternity. It's very powerful and very beautiful. So Jesus marveled at this non-believers, quote unquote, non-believers' great faith. We should ask, what is great faith? Faith isn't a quantity, a thing that you have a lot of or a little of, like a refrigerator well-stocked or empty. That's not how faith is. Faith is not agreeing with religious statements or claims. Great faith is believing wholeheartedly the difficult things that Jesus asks of us. Could I say that again? Great faith is believing wholeheartedly the difficult things Jesus asks of us. We can't even get people to agree to wear a mask or get a vaccine for the sake of others, especially for the sake of children. I wonder how many Christians would get in Jesus' face and argue with the things he mandates or requires of those who call themselves his followers. Finally, verse 10, the slave is well. In an ancient culture that believed a slave was of no greater value than a rake or a broom, no one is beyond the healing, helping, loving reach of Jesus. No one is beyond the healing, helping, loving reach of Jesus. And I think that if the world's Christians had great faith in this alone, Jesus loving someone he's never met and who he's been told has no value, I believe that would be sufficient to turn this world overnight on its end. I think it was Chesterton who said, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." Thank you for tuning in here these hot summer days. Prayers and a blessing for you and your family. God be with you.